at the turn. Um, Not really sure what to make of it. I would really expect him to bet that almost all the time. Change it up and just call with fives. And a lot of times when I do that, I just am deciding to bluff later because with a player who folds a lot on the flop and folds a lot to three bets, my approach with a hand with high implied odds is a lot of times, well, I can just bluff them later, give myself a chance to make a hand first, and then uh, and then put in a bluff. Uh, it does illustrate a point though that when someone checks back a flop, especially one that you would expect them to bet, one with two high cards on it, that board had a queen and a jack on it, they tend to have a hand with some showdown value, not a hand like a complete miss. Sometimes they have a gut shot, but a lot of times they have a hand with some showdown value. I did catch this guy checking back gut shot draws a fair amount, heads up. So that's something to note. I got a suited hand, standard spot for me to three bet him, and I get a pretty nice flop for my hand. I'm willing to go fairly far on this board with this hand, although it's kind of difficult to say exactly how is the right way to proceed. Start out by betting, obviously. Here, I think I was just I had three bet and taken down the pot so many times that on that draw heavy board I didn't expect to take it down very often, and I didn't really relish the thought of getting called or raised on the flop. So I thought it makes sense to just check it, and call one bet on the flop, see what happens. This is a pretty clear fold. I don't. There are some hands he can be bluffing with, but um, not often enough to make it a good call. Here the flop check back works out pretty nicely for me. Although I don't get any action from him, but if I don't get any action on that card, it's safe to assume I would not have gotten any on the flop. Finally, I at least get called when I raise with a big pair, which is nice. Over on the left-hand side, I have 3-bet, and I decided to check because, again, I'm turning my hand basically into a bluff by betting it, and I probably haven't crushed anything he'll call with. He calls a bet on the flop, which is a good sign. He's got to have a flush draw or an ace most of the time to call that bet. So when he raises, I am somewhat concerned, just given how nitty the guy was. But I don't. But I just think, obviously, there's no chance that I'm not getting it in. And I mean, I'm concerned by the river card, given that I just called on the turn. But it's still not a spot where I would ever consider folding. So I managed to quote unquote cooler him, although he did call with queens on the ace king flop, and then put in a ton more money. It's pretty hard not to when he turns the queen. But the fact that he chats about it each and every time he loses a big pot is a good sign for me. It either shows that he's not used to losing $200 at a time, or he's new to poker, or something, or just emotional. Any of those things would be good for me, um, because obviously you got to deal with this stuff a lot. Here he's on the left hand side. He's not reloading for some reason. I'm making some headway, and he's not reloading, um, which is a little aggravating when the guy's beating you out of $1,000 or something. Um, but clearly, in this hand, I like it. 50 big blinds deep. I'm happier about it, and I'm very willing to get the money in with an open ender and an overcard to the board if he were to raise. He does reload there, but a few times coming up, he lets himself trickle down. And I think it's just a spot where he's just trying to take an even bigger edge against someone he thinks is, too loose pre-flop and whatnot, and shorten the stacks. And I guess it's fine. To me, it seems like a little bit poor etiquette, but one thing I am continually learning is that people just don't really care about etiquette on the internet. There's not much concern for it by anyone except the top players, and I guess that's just the nature of the beast. Here, I don't expect I can get a whole lot of value, so raising somewhat marginal. It'd be a good spot to bluff, probably. Um, so I don't know how much value there is in raising there, but it just seems kind of criminal not to. The Jack-7 and the Jack-Queen are just not a big part of his range. Again, he's folding so much to 3-bets pre-flop that I decide not to 3-bet Ace-Queen because I think it wastes most of the value of it. It doesn't develop into any kind of pot, but he seemed to be folding so often to the 3-bets that hand, there's not much value in doing it because it's not one that I'm really happy to get 200 big blinds in against hardly anyone, certainly not this player. So it's not big enough to be happy to get 4-bet by, and I expect him to fold a ton of the hands I'm crushing, so it's pretty much a perfect one to just flat. Get one of his rare 3-bets since in fact 2 of them since the match started, and it might be a sign that he's making a little bit of an adjustment now. Might just be a sign that he picked up 2 good hands, but since the early in the match he hasn't been as aggressive pre-flop, and so I've started to respect those 3-bets a lot. Here's a spot where it doesn't make a lot of sense to do anything but give up when he calls a 3-bet when I have 10-9. Obviously a tremendous flop for me on the left-hand side, not just because of the set, but because there's an ace on the board. Gives him a probable second best hand that he can make. I have a kind of high implied